Thank you, everyone, for being here. We're going to get started with the Budget Committee meeting for tonight. Looking at the attendance, we have everyone present except for Marty Hyen, who sent in her excuse absence. The first item on the agenda tonight is going to be the superintendent's comments, and after that we are going to be hopefully reviewing some public comment or some follow-up questions also from community members, and if we have time. But first we're going to get started with the superintendent comments.
All right, so I'm going to do a quick process check. Good evening. So as I go through this tonight, a little bit will be repeat from the last meeting. Is it helpful for me to keep walking you through the budget book of where things would be in the budget book, or do you feel like you've got that down at this point? Anyone?
We got it down.
You got it down? Okay, you're good. Thanks for taking the lead there. Everyone else, you're good. Do keep in mind, though, everything is page numbered back to your book. You can look at it at any time. So tonight I am going to share, have three goals: share changes to the amendments to the proposed budget, share information about the Student Success Act, and then there were a couple additional questions from last week. So I just want to remind you kind of where we are, because we're taking a little detour here. So in my proposed budget, I presented it on April 23rd, 2019, and subsequently, I shared with you on May 7th some amendments to that proposed budget. But tonight I've replaced that May 7th document with the May 20th letter, so that we can put all of the summary documents and summary changes in one place. So the May 7th null and void, May 20th is your new document with amendments. And it is in your folder tonight. And everything that I talked about last time is included, but we've made some additional amendments to the proposed budget. So you have that, you have the PowerPoint that's here tonight, and you also have a new summary of FTE, because I thought that was the best way to change the document for you. So first of all, our beginning fund balance is being adjusted by $7 million. I described this change to you a couple weeks ago. It's on page 54, function 5400 in working capital. The proposed beginning fund balance at this point in time will be $50 million. Since we last met, we received our most recent state school fund estimate of $9 billion for K12 education statewide. This is up from the $8.97 billion, which was, if you remember correctly, the assumption we used to build our proposed 1920 budget. The other thing we've been doing is we've been continuing to monitor our enrollment. In the proposed budget, we projected enrollment for ADMW at 52,605. In our amended budget proposal, we are decreasing this enrollment to 52,472 for our ADMW. This decreases it by about 133 students, but it represents our current ADMW in Salem-Keizer for this year. So we've had a steady decrease this year. That assumption, when we get to our new budget book, will be reflected on page 23 in the proposed document. So the combination of a $9 billion state school fund estimate and the decline in enrollment, so a little bit more and a little bit less, nets about $664,157. The other estimate we've needed to watch is our high-cost disability. We've actually budgeted that too high in our proposed budget. We've determined this because we receive our high-cost disability payment in May. So our May 2019 payment for our high-cost disability students indicated that we needed to lower that number in our budget. So I think it's budgeted at $3.5 million, and we'll take that down in this proposed document to $1.25 million. If you're interested, it is on page 53, 3199, high-cost disability. So if we went back to the assumptions page in our book, you'd see that three of the major assumptions that we started with have changed. Our projected revenue, our enrollment, And also, there was a third one there that's already changed. Let me grab it here. Now I'm not gonna find it. And the beginning fund balance. So 3 things have changed since we proposed the budget in April. And I told you that that would be normal, that would be how it is. So state school fund has increased to 9 billion. Enrollment, we've decreased. And beginning fund balance has increased. So some additions. So there's our projected increase in resources, about $6.4 million. So on May 7th, when I presented, these are also in the proposed budget, the 6.0 counselor FTE remains, that was presented on May 7th. 1.0 social worker remains. On May 7th, I presented 16.88 FTE behavior cadre, all budgeted in 1111 elementary. In tonight's document, I've spread that out in a couple different ways rather than budgeting it all in elementary. What I want to tell you, though, that as we've worked on our staffing, the budget I'm proposing gives us 1 embedded behavior cadre in every single elementary school. So we've just split it out a little differently. So the first split is in 1.88 behavior trainer. We need 2 people to help be trainers for our behavior cadre. This is budgeted in 2240 and on page 80, and is on the support side of the house rather than instruction because it's professional development. 8.44 FTE elementary behavior cadre. So rather than the 18 all in elementary, you'll see 8.44 FTE elementary behavior cadre. 3.75 FTE at middle school behavior cadre, so that we can have the on-call cadre for our middle schools, because the way it currently has been working is our elementary schools have taken up the bulk of the time. So embedded behavior cadre at the elementary, floating behavior cadre at the middle school, and then 2.81 FTE behavior cadre at our behavior intervention center, so that we have additional cadre members at BIC. So same amount of FTE budgeted across the functions, slightly different. The next thing you'll see is teacher elementary and instructional support assistant. The combination of those 2 line items will provide additional FTE for 2 pilot short-term therapeutic classrooms. We've talked about the small classroom model for our kids in trauma, and these classrooms would be at the elementary level. They'd not be considered self-contained, because we don't want students to be in a self-contained classroom and remain there. We want short-term placement in order to get back into regular classroom and have access to the core content. So we chose 2 of those so that we could begin some piloting of, is this a good model, especially as we're gearing up for the Student Success Act. So teacher elementary, instructional assistant support, that would be 2 therapeutic classrooms at the elementary level. The next is some additional behavior specialist time at the secondary level. It's function 1131 high schools, would be on page 58. It's for some increased needs at the secondary level, because they don't have the embedded behavior cadre. Next, you'll see some reserve FTE for school administrators. The size of our school has increased, and in order to implement both behavior support systems and improve instructional outcomes, additional administrative support is needed, just as in all FTE across all levels, across all classifications. There could be more. Our hope was to put in 3 to kind of deal with some hot spots, and to see that if we could build up some administrative support, we can get some schools on track. So this could be to support principals out on leave. It could be for legend support instead of retired administrators. It also is an investment in the principal pipeline. As we have retirees, it is really a struggle to find principals ready for leading complex, high needs, large schools. The next FTE on the list is in reserve FTE for classified. I put in 18 on the instructional side, and we decided, there's always a need on the operational side as well, to have some flexibility as you see increasing demands. So this is 3.75 K12 classified on the support or the operational side of the house. I think the use of reserve FTE, especially over the course of this year as we're gearing up for the Student Success Act, is going to be helpful in deciding where do the resources need to land. So the next items on the amendment list are ELD teachers 3.0. You saw those last week. Indian education staff to full-time. You saw those on May 7th. Native language specialists and translators increased to 12 months. You saw that on May 7th. Preschool grant shortfall at $40,000. You saw that already. And charter school payments, as our state school fund increases, as do our payments out to charter schools. The next item, school improvement fund planning time. This is a new ad from May 7th. So after I finished the proposed amendments to the budget, I'll share with you the planning requirements in order to receive the school improvement fund through the Student Success Act. It's going to be a year-long planning process, and important in that planning process is outreach both to our licensed and our classified groups. So we've put some dollars in additional earnings as we do some committee work in preparation for the Student Success Act dollars. And then the transfer to preventative and deferred maintenance, restoring it to its previous level. You saw this on May 7th as well. And then the $1 transfer to the PERS pension debt service. By putting a dollar there, it gives us a flexibility to put a transfer in the future. And finally, we have about an increase to the contingency of about $1.1 million, and this brings the budgeted contingency to 4.1%, just slightly higher than was proposed at the end of April. So that represents the additional amendments to the proposed budget. They're all outlined in the memo that replaces the May 7th memo. And in your packets are the updated summary of FTE and wages for the general fund. So you have summary of wages, the FTE comparisons by program within the functions, and the explanation of the changes. So you have all of those there that are updated to reflect the amendments, because I think that becomes a really important piece. So next I want to just share with you some of my recent learnings around the Student Success Act. And I think it's important to, number one, just stop for a minute and say this is a historical moment in public education. But these funds are also going to come to us very differently than funds have come to us in the past. Generally, we get a state school fund. The district determines how best to allocate resources. The state wants to be sure we adhere to budget law, and we kind of get on with our day and do our business. This is not that sort of a process. So the Student Success Act does involve an inclusive public strategic planning process. So while we've done some work on the Student Success Act funds, we haven't done a wholesale public strategic planning process. We will have to have a completed needs assessment. It will have to tie to our consolidated improvement plan. We'll have to identify where the places are within our system that we don't have equitable outcomes, and we'll have to budget to those outcomes. So that's a really important distinction for the Student Success Act funds. We will need and want to get input from district stakeholders, including school employees, students from underserved groups, and parents from those groups. This is why we put some dollars in additional earnings in the proposed budget for 19-20 to help us with that planning. And we'll have to use the data to make equity-based decision-making. We will have to do an analysis of the potential academic impacts for our students, specifically our underserved. We'll have to identify the allowable uses. They'll be in the 4 buckets that I've described before. We'll need to set performance targets. It'll be presented and approved by the board, and we will be required to have a comprehensive audit, financial audit like we always do, but also a performance audit. And I don't think that's an every year performance audit. So as we start gearing up for that, I think it's really important to know that that's going to be really part of the district's work in the coming months. So with that, I'm going to switch. We had a few additional questions from last time that I'm going to attempt to answer, and then I'll pause and breathe, so if you have some questions of me. So the question was, how are the meals that the district supplies funded? I did point that out in your budget book last time, but the U.S. Department of Agriculture and Oregon Department of Ed reimburse free, reduced, and cash meals for the school districts that participate in the National School Lunch Program. Meals have to meet the USDA guidelines to receive reimbursement. It's a highly regulated industry in food service. Approximately 75% of the revenues come from the state and federal reimbursements, the remaining 15% from meal sales and miscellaneous grants. One of the grants that the board has seen is around the farm to school, additional fruit and vegetables. Those are some of those miscellaneous grants that help get food and vegetables into our schools and on our lunch lines. The USDA commodities food entitlements provide an additional 10% of program credits, and we do buy a lot of the commodities because that's how you have a program that is cash even. So the next question was, who makes the decision regarding menus? The menus are designed by the Sodexo management staff, which includes a registered dietitian and an executive chef. And we have a Northwest Regional Culinary Menu Committee who assists with recipe development, product testing, and nutritional analysis. Ideas from the committee are reviewed monthly by our on-site team, including some of the kitchen managers out in our schools, who then add new items and create our final monthly menus. We've done some major changes across our high schools and how we serve and present food and the types of food we give, and we've received some fairly positive feedback about that. A couple of the schools were waiting for some bond construction to be met before we get to those. The last question was around nutritional guidelines. What are the nutritional guidelines being used? We have to meet the USDA's menu planning regulations with standards set for sodium, saturated fat, trans fat, and calories based on age, grade group, and analyzed by our nutrition and analysis software. I don't know, I remember the day that we had to change from regular fat ranch to low-fat ranch, and that was when I was an elementary principal. And some of those guidelines like that put into question quality as well. That was a very upset day at my elementary school when we went from full-fat to non-fat ranch. But we have very strict nutritional guidelines. Some of the items on our menus are perceived as fast food, but they're formulated to exceed the nutrition guidelines, including those for whole grains, so whole grain pizza crust, no trans fat, reduced saturated fats, and sodium. And as if the board would like additional information about the school lunch program, we could certainly also bring that into a work session. The next question came up about a little bit more information about contingency. So the contingency in the budget is your 4 emergencies. We try to not use it because you actually want your contingency to drop to your ending fund balance so that you can have a healthy beginning fund balance. If you think you can see the ads when we were projecting our beginning fund balance at 43 million, and what happened because we have more dollars that are dropping to that bottom line ending fund balance of 7 million, you can see how we were able to add more positions. So the contingency is meant for emergencies, but also to drop to that ending fund balance. We have used it to purchase buses for the boundary change, if there's emergency operations that need to happen, flooding, significant damage to buildings, unforeseen purchases. And technically, it should cover payroll if in the event of emergency. Our payroll for 1 month is $34 million for all funds, payroll, health insurance. And funding volatility is also why you do need a contingency there. Our automated system has tightened up our budget to the point where a higher level of contingency is actually desired because we are systematically removing any excess in our estimates. So the better our system, the more accurate our projections are because we know exactly what's going on in our system. So we're in year 2 of our automated system and we're still studying those run rates to see what's the appropriate amount. So our financial policy requires the ending or beginning fund balance, ending fund balance to be about, or contingency to be 1%, but the financial policy also requires our ending fund balance target to be between 5 and 7%. Best practice would be about 10% ending fund balance. So that's just some information around contingency. You do see that I did additions beyond what was presented on May 7th. It helps that we're having a clear picture of our assumptions and revenue, and in order to really be sure that we are can make it through both years of the biennium. One question that has come up to me a couple places is around our the positive revenue forecast. So you heard on the news it was not just a positive, an extremely positive revenue projection for the state of Oregon. And our legislators were a bit stunned by that. So the huge increase in tax collection will mean Oregon's kicker will be the largest on record. $1.4 billion is set to be returned to the taxpayers unless our legislators make a different decision. And the corporate kicker grew to unprecedented levels. $616 million in the corporate kicker is also forecasted, but that money is dedicated to K12 spending. But it doesn't require our legislature to automatically increase spending to us. So just because there's another $616 million doesn't mean they're going to increase that $9.0 billion to schools. So that's really important. What our crystal ball is telling us right now is to count on the 9.0, be confident in that number, be hopeful about the Student Success Act, plan in a way that helps us think and build in our school district, but to also keep a close eye on our fiscal responsibilities. And with that, I believe that the proposed budget with amendments that I've presented tonight will do a great job of investing in a few initiatives, do some good things for kids out in classrooms, and help us keep in a financially solid position. So with that, do you want to open for questions? Do you want to just go right on to public comment, Levy?
I know we have people sign up, but I do want to make sure if people have any clarifying questions about the information.
Yeah.
Rachel?
So if the corporate kicker is dedicated to K-12, but the legislature doesn't have to put it into the school fund, what happens to it? Does it just sort of sit in limbo waiting for a bad year? Or?
It goes into the K-12 rainy day fund.
That's right. Thank you.
It's diverted into a K-12 rainy day fund. It's like a contingency fund for the legislature for K-12 education,
Okay.
Rachel. And that's where it sits. They do have to vote to appropriate any of that money out of there.
Okay.
Jim, you had a couple questions.
I do have a couple of questions. On the first one, our high-cost disability going down, is that just because we don't have those students? Because I know they're planning to double the high-cost disability fund. Have we lost ADMW in our high-cost disability?
Yeah, we have, as we've shifted to have resources that aren't tied exactly to kids every day, it's been a little trickier to track the high-cost disability. So there is some of it, a slight change in model, but I think maybe last year we also over-projected because we were already looking for an increase that we saw coming, and I think we have over-projected that increase.
And then my other question deals with the 2 pilot therapeutic programs that you've got planned. How long are you planning on those being a pilot? Is it just the first year? Are you looking at both years of the biennium? And then my second question on that one is, what data will you or Eric use to measure success in those programs?
So right now, we're thinking pilot in the first year as we prepare for the Student Success Act. And then we haven't gotten as far as metrics, but the goal would be that students that are really have complex behavior needs actually learn to self-regulate and then can spend more time in the regular classroom. So ultimately, that's the metric, is how much time do they have access and how are we improving that time in core content. With our self-contained classrooms, they become so much more self-contained. We want to try to get them to the grade level content. But we will have that.
And I do appreciate you looking at the contingency. I was the one that mentioned that we were going to put almost 43% of the 7 million into contingency. And I know contingency is important, but you're projecting about 18% into contingency. I think that's probably accurate, knowing where we're at. And I appreciate you deploying those resources, because if we don't, it's one more year that students won't have those services. And I appreciate you taking a look at that.
It also feels safer on May 20th than it did on May 7th. Positive revenue forecast, 9.0.
I may have knew some of those things were coming.
Yeah,
So.
you might have had some inside information. Yeah.
Sharon?
So speaking of contingency, where is he? Mike Wolf had mentioned in a bond update that a certain level of contingency also helps us with our bond rating and our ability to draw down on funds, and the really high amount that we've pulled in from our bonding has allowed us to invest more into our schools, I'm completely butchering what you said, but could you clarify?
Yeah, just another way to emphasize how important a consistent contingency is year over year. When we go out into the bond market and we get rated by Moody's rating agency, they're looking at year over year how consistent we adhere to our financial policies and have an ending fund balance, which the contingency is a major part of the ending fund balance. And so for it to fluctuate from 2 to 5% in any given year doesn't give us great confidence as we head into the next market cycle with the bond issuance. So it's really important to have a level of predictability and reliability there. And it does matter for our ratings with Moody.
The financial planning that the board and budget committees previously have done around our PERS debt obligation have been also critical in that.
Chuck?
Yeah, my question revolves around the enrollment projection. I've been sitting here for 12 years, and every year the enrollment's gone up.
I know.
And I know that the figures that we got from Portland State when we were looking at developing the bond, I think it called for about 500 new kids a year for the next 5 or 6 years. What's happened to change our projection from that 500 a year to freezing it?
So right now, we are watching that enrollment, for whatever reason, flatten. This is the first year we've seen some flattening at the elementary level in previous years, but we've still been up overall. So we've seen that flatten. So these are kind of the real numbers versus projections. All of our projections still say we are a growing district. Just in this budget proposed for next year, we don't see that short-term growth in kids. We've seen it flatten.
Did we go back to Portland State this year to?
Well, with Flow Analytics, they've done that really deep dive in our, through that boundary change process around our enrollment. They've looked at every housing development, and we're still projecting a increase in kids. It just so happens that at this moment in time, we've flattened. So, and in the proposed budget may have overprojected.
Jesse?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask a question on the nutrition stuff that we were talking about. I would like to learn more about a nutrition program and just what it would look like to make things a little healthier. And I don't know what the cost would be on that because I have no clue. I'm not a dietitian. Just because I would say from experience, the whole wheat pizza and the fat-free ranch is just as unappetizing as healthy food to me. And so I would like to look at, just because I think feeding kids right is important, especially when we're expecting them to learn. I would like to look at that.
And so my question back is this going to be for the budget process, or do you want to have board leadership think about that?
That's a good question. I guess it would be up to the budget committee as a whole.
Yeah.
Board leadership.
Sharon?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, we've already, Kathy and I have talked about bringing it as a work session for, sorry. So Kathy and I have talked about bringing it as a work session for the school board.
Okay, cool.
So,
Right.
for us to take a look at, take a closer look at.
Yeah. I think we can handle it too. If we need to, then we can change our mind and bring it before the board.
Okay, sounds good enough to me.
Thank you. So now we're going to move to the public comment section of the meeting. We have a few people sign up to speak. What I'm going to do is I'm going to call the name of the person that's going to come up and the person following them so that we get a nice queue going. We're going to have 3 minutes for people to speak. If somebody does need translation, we'll allow 5 minutes to make sure that they are able to get that message out and be understood, their message. As a reminder for the community, we are not able to engage with people who are giving testimony during this portion, but for committee members, I encourage you to take notes, and if we can figure out a way to follow up on some of the issues that are brought up, especially for our elected board members on the committee. So with that, I'm gonna call the first 2 people who are signed up are first Javier Quiroz and followed by Olivia Palazzo Angulo.
Through the legislature. Seems like every kid needs to be just going.
Good evening, Superintendent Christy Perry and members of the school board. My name is Javier Quiroz, parent organizing project of the Salem-Keizer Coalition for Equality. Thank you for investing in professional development of teachers, including the Language and Cultural Institute you do with the coalition. However, there are so many teachers that need this type of training because they will enjoy it more than any kind of trainings they might normally go to. The Institute is a model that includes popular education as well immersion into a local community that is foreign to many. And it's a lot cheaper than going to another place for a cultural experience. Finally, it is the most unique experience for anyone because it is facilitated by parents, and we have had many comments about it from the teachers. I want to tell you a couple of comments. One teacher came up to a Institute staff member and gave her a hug, a big hug, and cried and said that everything in her teaching was going to change forever. Another teacher made it clear that she wasn't very happy about being there, but she wanted the professional development credits a Western, were offered thanks to Steve Nelson. So she was going to put herself into that she thought would be a waste of time instead. But by the end of the institute, she was thankful and enthusiastic about her experience with the institute. Now here's my concern. I like your budget, but I'm still worried that you are not investing enough in the right kind of professional development. I feel that SKC should partner with the school district and put on 2 institutes each year instead of just 1. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Olivia? And after
Good evening.
Olivia will be, Angelica Lagos.
Good evening, Budget Committee Chair and Superintendent. She's not up there this time. No, there she is. Okay, I'm Olivia Palazzo Angulo, and I live in Northeast Salem at 3644 31st Avenue Northeast. And my child goes to North Salem High School. And tonight I'm just here to ask you if you could rethink the budget process, because we've had some really interesting experiences in the last 20 years. And I'm feeling the lack of involvement. I want to go back to the days when we at least started in January. We used to start in November. But it was for all the budget committee members to really understand more about each department. And so we used to have visitors from different departments come and share what they did in their department and how they used their money so that we could learn about the major departments. It built a lot of leadership, and we had several really knowledgeable school board members get elected after being in that committee because they learned so much. And it helps you a lot to be able to make a better assessment of how the budget is working. So we used to do it. I'd like to ask if that could come back. It quit happening before Christy got here. So that's my request, and thank you very much.
Thank you. So after Angelica Lagos, we have John Harmson. And you will have 5 minutes total.
Buenas noches, Superintendente Christine Perry y miembros del Comité de Presupuesto de nuestras escuelas. Mi nombre es Angélica Lagos, vivo en la 2885 de la Front Street, aquí en Salem, Oregon. Soy madre de familia y trabajo para los padres de la Coalición para la Igualdad de Salem-Keizer. Estamos muy contentos de escuchar acerca del nuevo programa para el consejeros de salud mental en 20 escuelas. Sabemos que ellos son profesionales fuera del distrito quienes pueden proveer servicios en las escuelas, mientras que puedan cobrar la aseguranza por sus servicios para las familias, para que tengan más accesos a los servicios médicos mentales. Sin embargo, estamos muy preocupados sabiendo que muchos maestros y directores no tienen buen entendimiento de los detalles de la salud mental. Los entrenamientos de respuesta cultural de equidad actualmente pueden ayudar con cualquier problema de salud mental. También sin el entrenamiento del estructurado para incluir la inteligencia emocional y respuesta a todas las diferencias que tienen los niños, en especialmente los jóvenes. Entender a los niños es lo más importante. Y sentimos que muchos maestros y la mayoría de los maestros no tienen y por lo tanto castigan a los niños, lo que tradicionalmente han llevado al sistema de aprobatorio o prisión a muchos de nuestros niños y jóvenes de color. Por favor, incrementen más el financiamiento que ustedes le están dando al programa de salud mental y al entrenamiento de los maestros. Muchas gracias.
Good evening, Superintendent Christy Perry and members of our School Budget Committee. My name is Angelica Lagos, and my address is 2885 Front Street. I'm a parent facilitator of education, Inspire Parent of Education program. We were so happy to hear about the new program to put our mental health counselors in 20 schools. We know that they are outside professionals who can provide services at the schools and still charge insurance for payments. The families have more access to mental health services and they will be more likely to use the services much faster. However, we are really worried that many teachers and principals don't have any understanding of mental health. The culturally responsive training of equality actually can help with any mental issues, and also if it structure the training to include more emotional intelligence and responsibility to all the differences children have, especially teenagers. Understanding kids is the main thing, and we feel like many teachers and majority of teachers do not understand and therefore punish the kids, which traditionally has led to many kids of color in the system. Please increase even more of the funding that you are doing for mental health and teacher training. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Joan Harmson.
Yes.
Yeah, Joan Harmson.
Joan Harms. Okay, got it.
Apologies. And after that, we have Marisela Lagos.
Well, this might sound repetitious because I was here last week complaining and charging the taxpayers big money, and you're not getting value for it. Oh, they're not. I found this in the paper, and I thought it was very interesting. For over 20 years, I have taught school and seen a number of policy changes that were enacted to help students, but have had the reverse effect. Students come to class without homework, tell me they don't feel like doing it, or hand in sloppy work with grammatical errors and terrible spelling. With poor grades and a lack of self-discipline, they'll never make it to college. How can we get parents more involved with their children? How can I stress the importance of spending time, not money, with their children? And the answer was, parents need to put down the cell phone, turn off the TV and computer, and spend time with their kids. Our children are the only truly important thing that we leave behind. And I worked in the schools for about 10 years, taught in the prisons and taught in Chemeketa Community College, and did a lot of sub work, which is the worst job imaginable. But anyway, these classrooms are chaotic. I found one school, Albany Junior High, where there was order and discipline, and it was a pleasure to be there. And I said to the teachers, how do you do this? Well, she said, we teachers get together, and this is the rule, and this is how it's going to be. These kids are not disciplined. The teacher training that I went through was very poor. I come from Australia, and we had a teachers training college, 4 years, and then 1 whole year under an experienced teacher. How are you going to take this kid out of college and put him in a classroom? They need to have help. I tell you, I went to Dallas. I told you about going to Dallas, and I was supposed to be doing my practicum, and I never got to do anything. I said to the teacher, aren't you supposed to be helping me? I'm supposed to teach. Oh, yeah, you can teach next week. You can teach tomorrow. So I got the lessons all ready, and he disappeared and never came back till the end of the class. And my daughter in Minnesota, first grade, we had a new teacher. Am I out of time? I had a new teacher. We had a new teacher. And my daughter was bringing home papers. I said, these kids are not learning anything here. Well, 6 months went by and she left. Okay. Then, let me just finish. Then we hired an experienced teacher. And she said those kids hadn't learned one thing in 6 months. Now, how did this girl get a teaching degree? Training, discipline in the classroom, get value for our taxpayers' money. Thank you.
Thank you. Marisela Lagos.
She had some.
Buenas tardes, Superintendente Christy Perry y miembros del Comité del Presupuesto de nuestras escuelas. Mi nombre es Marisela Lagos y vivo en el 3110 Moreland Avenida Noroeste en Salem, Oregon. Soy facilitadora de los programas de padres y madres de la Coalición para la Igualdad de Salem-Keizer y asistente de nuestro Instituto de Verano de Lenguaje y Cultura. Estoy muy agradecida por la extra atención dada en los 2 pasados años para encontrar maestros bilingües y biculturales. Estoy feliz con los programas de la preparatoria que están enviando a nuestros estudiantes a estudiar a la Universidad de Western Oregon para convertirse en maestros. También estoy feliz con los programas que ayudan a nuestros asistentes de maestros para poder continuar estudiando para ser maestros. También estoy muy feliz con el señor Steve Nelson, que él sea el reclutador de candidatos para este programa de maestros. Sin embargo, todavía pienso que el señor Nelson no tiene suficiente dinero en su presupuesto para hacer todo lo que él necesita y pudiera hacer. Y sé que él tiene buenas ideas si su presupuesto fuera incrementado. Es muy bueno que el porcentaje de maestros bilingües ha incrementado del 6% al 8.5% en los últimos 3 años. Pero tenemos mucho más por hacer para llegar a la par entre el número de nuestros estudiantes latinos y el número de nuestros maestros latinos bilingües. La razón por qué esto es tan importante es porque nuestros estudiantes no se están beneficiando tanto como debieran con los programas de literacy, porque solo llega hasta el 2º grado o 3er grado, dependiendo del número de maestros calificados. Ahora estamos felices sabiendo que el distrito ha incrementado el programa hasta el 5º grado en varias escuelas y convirtiéndose en un programa real de salida temprana del programa bilingüe. Ahora, varias escuelas medianas y 2 preparatorias tienen programas duales hasta el 12º grado y los estudiantes están calificando para ganar un certificado de alfabetización doble cuando sean graduados de la preparatoria. Pero muchos de los padres y madres con quien frecuentemente hablo en español están tristes al saber que sus hijos no tuvieron esta oportunidad. He escuchado de empleados del distrito escolar diciendo que la única razón del por qué no tenemos más de estas clases es porque necesitamos tener más maestros calificados para expandir el programa. Por favor, financien mejor al Departamento de Recursos Humanos, especialmente el presupuesto del señor Steve Nelson, para aumentar y mejorar todo en lo que estamos trabajando y está saliendo bien. Muchas gracias.
Good evening. My name is Katherine Lopez Lagos, and I am here to support good education for children and to translate for my mom. Good evening, Superintendent Christy Perry and members of our school budget committee. My name is Marisela Lagos. I live in 3110 Moreland Avenue Northeast, 97305. I am a parent program facilitator of the Salem-Keizer Coalition for Equality and assistant to our Summer Language Culture Institute. I have been thankful for the extra attention in the last 2 years to find more bicultural, bilingual teachers. I am happy about the high school programs that send our students to Western Oregon University to become teachers. I am happy about the program. However, I am happy about the programs that help bilingual, bicultural instructional assistants to become teachers. I am thankful that Steve Nelson is a recruiter. However, I still think he does not have enough money in his budget to do everything he would like to do, and I think he would have a lot more ideas if his budget was increased. It is great that the percentage of bilingual teachers has increased from 6% to 8.5% in the last 3 years, but we have a long way to go to reach parity between the numbers of Latino students and their Latino bilingual teachers. The reason this is so important is that our children were not benefiting as much as they could with literacy squared because it only went through 2nd or 3rd grade, depending on the availability of qualified teachers. Now we are so happy that the district is increasing it to 5th grade and becoming a truly early exit bilingual program at many schools. And now several middle schools and 2 high schools have dual language cleared to 12th grade, and students are qualifying for the extra Oregon Biliteracy certificate when they graduate. But many parents I talk to, both Spanish and English speakers, are so disappointed that their child did not have this opportunity. I have heard from the district that basically the only reason we can't have more classes is because we need more of the right teachers to make it happy. Please fund human resources, especially Steve Nelson's budget, to increase everything that we are doing and that is working. Thank you.
Thank you. And that was the last person signed up to speak tonight. I want to ask Superintendent Perry if you want to address anything that was brought up.
So
Nice.
I'll just make a couple comments. The Language and Cultural Institute that they referenced, it is about a 3-week institute that is an Spanish immersion program. It costs us between about $9,000 to about $11,000 a year, and I believe we have around 20 educators. We're in the process of recruiting for that right now. And then HR is budgeted in 2640 staff services on page 90.
Rachel?
So, this is, I mean, in terms of the recruitment of dual language teachers, I mean, is that something where your take or HR's take is that if we had more money in HR, it would be easier to find them, or is it a problem that the number sort of existing in this area of Oregon is limited?
Yeah, well, one of the tricky parts is we have that $360,000 that we place in there for our Grow Your Own programs. We haven't, we spend in the ballpark of that, but we never overspend. And the real strategy is in those high school kids graduating on a trajectory and getting them into college. We aren't typically, though, in the business of paying for college tuition,
Right.
which would be something that we'd have to really think about. Is that an investment we would make in people, other than in our own employees? So for our high school kids, we haven't typically done that. So I guess I haven't thought about how much more would be enough. Our recruiting strategies that are within the district, within our own kids, are the recruiting strategies that are really starting to pay off. So, John, do you have anything to add to that?
No, I would just second the fact that you highlighted the important part, which is our own kids that are then seeking careers in education is the best information we have, both locally and nationally. But it's a long road.
Yeah, and I think some of our bigger need for recruiting is in our classified staff, bus drivers, instructional assistants, and we continue to not have a great strategy around that. We're doing all the best practices, but we aren't closing the gap.
All right. Last comment?
I can't quite place in my mind where it came about, but we're feeding more children, are we not? There was a memorandum that came around that I read someplace that said all children will be given breakfast and lunch.
So the universal meals is part of the Student Success Act. And so we are, that's been an important piece. There was the $2 billion, $1 billion in the school improvement fund, and the other $1 billion was early learning, universal meals. And so the goal from that Student Success Act is to actually feed more kids.
Yeah.
So we'll see how those regs roll out for us.
Okay, so we will be possibly putting more money into that.
Correct.
Can we get more federal or state money because of the amount of kids?
It will be money from the state to increase access to meals. The tricky part is that you have to be really careful that you don't pay for things that the federal government could be paying for. So it's a dance as they figure out the exact regulations around it. And we would get more money if we feed more kids.
Good.
Thank you. I do want to move us along just because we have the committee deliberations, so I do want to ask if there are any questions that if anybody's gonna be proposing any amendments to the budget, so I wanna allow enough conversation for that. That's the question before us, committee members right now. Is there anybody that's prepared to present an amendment to the budget?
So I just have a question, Levy, and it's a process question. The numbers that Superintendent Perry prepared for us tonight do change the initial budget that was put forward, though, correct?
Correct.
So the budget that we would, if we would adopt without any amendments, includes the budget that you presented in April, the May 7th, and the changes that were ultimately in tonight with the reductions in our high-cost disability, reduction in the ADMW. So it's modified since your original superintendent's budget message is what we're looking at.
Correct. And the best way to understand all the modifications is the May 20 memo.
So I'm not seeing any, anybody jumping up and proposing any amendments, so I do want to capture questions around, so I want to go back to Adriana and just.
Yeah, first I want to thank everyone. Quiero darle las gracias a todos los padres que se presentaron a abogar por más fondos para programas bilingües en nuestro distrito. So just thanking the parents for their advocacy in advocating for more bilingual programs in our district. I want to encourage the superintendent and her cabinet. I think with the student success monies that we see coming in, and as the process in developing the goals, I would love to see more programs and essentially more of our schools turning into our dual language programs. I know that out of the 6 high schools, we only have 2, and it's growing and it's expanded throughout the years. But I think that parents see the value, and not only teachers, but as we look into growing our own teachers and adding more bilingual teachers that reflect our demographics, I think that's the way to start. If we start growing our students into being bilinguals, they can then reflect the demographics in our schools. So I would love to see that as being one of the priorities with these new funds. Thank you.
Jesse?
I also wanted to address that, and I just wanted to ask the question of, I know you touched on this a little bit as far as like college tuition and stuff, but I would like to hear what the administration, what you guys think that we could do to, if we had more money to give to this program, what we could do with it and how it would help.
Yeah, which program?
To the Grow Your Own program.
Grow Your Own. Well, you could put more right now we have $360,000 on that line item, and we could add more dollars to that to run more cohorts. Those are primarily targeted, though, at our internal staff. And you don't want to put too many in. You want to be sure you have the right people that are ready for that. And so we've systematically, I don't think I'd recommend right off the bat increasing it. The Language and Cultural Institute is really a good institute. It's a great an emergent program. The coalition does a fabulous job. Right now, we're struggling to be sure we have participants.
Yeah.
So I think if we had too many participants, which should be our goal, we would find ways to fund that.
Okay.
I don't know if I exactly answered your question.
Not exactly. I was meaning more towards the our thing with Western Oregon. Like
well, already our goal is that those kids have a free college experience. So that when they go from high school to Chemeketa, that's on the college promise. So there's dollars from their state promise dollars for community college tuition. And then our goal is when they transition to Western to be sure that they have scholarships and grant and aids. So we do some special advising with them to work to get as close as possible a free college experience for them. And then they work in the summer. Our financial commitment is they work in the summer in our summer school programs, and we pay them for that.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Cynthia?
I just wanted to revisit for a minute just a concern. You mentioned the reduction in the high-cost disability fund, but also a difficulty in tracking. So I'm concerned about an erosion of those funds for the kids, especially who are now being mainstreamed into gen ed in junior high and high school. I can speak as a parent. They're not getting the support they need in gen ed. The teachers are not ready to receive them. They are not getting real-time modification of curriculum. So it is almost like they're in a classroom without a bilingual teacher almost. They're not understanding in real time what they are getting. So I applaud the effort, but I am concerned about the potential erosion of resources when we really need more resources to make these kids successful, and the convergence of behavior and special education needs. I hope that as you're piloting your 2 classrooms, you're carefully taking data about what it really means for kids to successfully integrate from a contained classroom that has its pros and cons to gen ed classroom, and the kind of support and accompaniment they need, and as well as the kind of education and training that teachers need in order to receive them appropriately to continue their education, versus just being able to say, well, we got them out of the contained classroom, so now we're great. That diploma needs to mean something. It needs to mean that they have reached grade level, and I am very concerned that that is currently not happening.
Well, thank you everyone for participating. We've listened to public comment, and we've given committee members an opportunity to propose amendments to the budget. We don't see any proposals at this time, so I'm gonna skip all that process for how that would have gone. I do wanna thank everyone who came out and took the time to make comments. I'm gonna move us on to the next item on the agenda, which would be then, seeing no proposals, or would be for the approval of the 2019-2020 proposed budget as presented with the updates from the superintendent. And we would need a motion for that to be passed, and ask him if you would read that.
Sure. I would move that on May 20th, 2019, that the Budget Committee of the Salem-Keizer School District 24J-32, Marion and Polk Counties, Oregon, approve the budget as amended by the superintendent on May 20th, 2019 for the 2019-20 fiscal year in the amount of $1,200,712,966, and approves property taxes for the 2019-20 fiscal year at the rate of $4.5210 per assessed value for the permanent tax rate levy in support of the general fund, and in the amount of $52,735,132 for the general obligation bonds levy.
Second.
Thank you. Jim and Jesse, second. Now we have, is there any discussion? Chuck?
Excuse me, just a question on process. Can we approve the budget tonight, or do we need to wait till tomorrow night to give another opportunity for public testimony?
Technically, yes, you can tonight, and we did receive some clarification. I'm going to let you tell who that's from, and because we did double check that, Sarah.
So I sent our notice that was printed in the paper to Department of Revenue, to Melanie there, and said, this is exactly how we noticed it as it appeared, to be sure, because we did say that public testimony may continue, and she said that we made it clear that if the budget was approved, that the meetings would end.
But we would also have the opportunity as the board to hear additional testimony on the budget, because what the Budget Committee is doing is just approving the budget forwarded to the board for final adoption, correct?
That's correct. Yep. You have a whole nother round of public testimony.
Well, I believe we need to wait and vote tomorrow night. I think for months, we've been saying there would be a meeting on the 21st. And I think it's a breach of public trust if we don't hold the meeting tomorrow night, at least just to show up, take public comment, and vote. I think we have to. But I, of course, can be outvoted.
Are we going to be able to get a quorum for tomorrow? That would be
That's a
my
good question.
concern.
So everybody has that date saved on their calendar, right?
Yeah, it was planned.
Excuse me.
Sharon and then Chuck. And
But just to clarify, so how was it noticed? How is it written? Because my understanding was that we would hold a meeting tonight, and if we needed tomorrow, we would be here tomorrow.
Yeah, we're pulling it up.
Okay.
Read item 5 on the budget.
Well, hold on, Paul. Sorry. So that was my understanding as well, and I just have to say, as a committee member, I've spent about probably the last 4 months putting the call out for people to attend, and although I love everybody who's come out here, it is, again, I'm moving this to the side, and just as a committee member, it is really disappointing not to have a lot more people show up, not just tonight, but in the previous meetings. So I am all for public comment, and if everybody wants to be here for tomorrow and allow for more people who are going to show up, I am all for that. But I think what I want to make clear is that efforts have been made to let people know there is a point in time, and I have done that personally, and I've taken my personal time to tell people that. So I know that the committee has made every effort to engage people. And but I know Chuck was going to say something, and then Paul, who I interrupted.
I only bring it up because historically, that's what we've done, is we have had the 2 nights of public testimony and then made that decision. That being said, I'm not necessarily in favor of having another meeting tomorrow night. I think the chair has pointed out that we've given people plenty of opportunity to testify if they would like. I brought it up because my experience over the years has been is that we have always had 2 nights of public testimony, and then we take the vote, so.
Yeah, that is historically true. The way that we continue to do the budget notice is public comment, May 20 and 21st, 2019, public comment received, deliberations on proposed budget until approved or recommended to the school board for adoption. So you could do it technically by the notice either night. Historically, though, Chuck is accurate, that it's usually been 2 nights.
Sorry, I brought it up.
Yeah.
Paul, and then Rachel and Kathy.
I believe anybody looking at the agenda for tonight's meeting, under 5A, it very clearly says it'll be move approval of the budget forward to the next meeting.
This is or.
Or, it's 2 possible motions.
Yeah.
Okay, I still believe we have to have a meeting tomorrow night.
So, I'm happy to come. I think the one thing that is different about this year than previous years is that there have been years where people have proposed fairly major amendments to the budget at this meeting, where it seemed like, or, they had at least been put on the table as major changes. I mean, there was the issue around Avid last year, and in that case, it seemed really important that if the budget that was seeming like it might be leaving this meeting was significantly different than the budget that was coming into this meeting, that it was really important that people, this year, it seems like that's not the case, and that there isn't something that's going to go into the paper saying, which is going to lead a whole bunch of people to come out and say, no, don't do that, really don't do that. So, I am comfortable moving ahead with it. I'm also, I think maybe at this point we just need to kind of get a straw vote on whether we need to come back.
Kathy, and then Jesse.
Well, I do remember last Tuesday night on the 14th, we had a large turnout, and so we did accept testimony on the budget, even though it wasn't on the actual agenda, but we had only one person testify. So really, that was another option. They weren't notified of that ahead of time, but it was made at the time.
Oh, you're good. Yeah, I just want to say that I agree with Levy. I mean, I wish that we had more testimony, just because I think it's really important that people show up and share their thoughts, and just because that's kind of how the process is set up for. So I do wish we had more people. Of course, last year and years before, a lot of times we had big changes, and ones that were somewhat controversial. And so, of course, we have a lot of people show up. This year, there wasn't really any proposals. And so I'm pretty comfortable either way. If we feel like I feel like it seems pretty transparent that this meeting was here today, and if it was approved, we wouldn't have tomorrow's. So I'm comfortable with that. If we feel like as a committee that we need to be given an extra day just in case, I'm cool with that too.
So a question about process. So how we have a motion on the floor?
Yeah, you do have a motion on the floor.
Can we, how do we?
In a second.
Yeah. So how do we, how would we have a
Yeah.
roll call?
Can we do a thumbs up?
Yeah. I think you have to vote on the motion that's on the floor, but.
Rachel?
So for the purposes of discussion, I will move a substitute motion that we we reconvene tomorrow night to approve the budget. And so if that's what you want to do, we would want to second this motion and then to vote on it. If that isn't what people want to do, you should vote this motion down. Does that make sense?
Yes. So did you just make that motion?
I just made that motion.
Second.
Thank you.
It's like Inception.
So any further discussion on this motion? Staff?
Which motion?
On the,
My substitute motion,
Yeah.
think this is appropriate by rules to handle it. I think
Yeah, there's already a motion
Oh.
on the floor.
propose the second, and we need to act on that motion.
that's what I was looking at.
Yeah.
Staff
Yeah,
for
do-
process
yeah.
help.
Yeah.
Under Robert's rules, you have
Yeah.
a motion on the floor, you have a proper second, you need to vote on that motion. There is
Or
not
amend
such
it.
thing as a substitute motion under Robert's rules. You can ask for an amendment to be made to the motion, but the person who made the main motion has to agree to that motion, and I do not agree to that as an amended motion.
So then,
We
what,
have to vote on the motion before the body.
But we
Okay,
don't,
so
but
that's
an amendment does not have to be agreed upon by the maker of the motion.
No, that's true,
Okay,
but
that
we
was
need
what
to-
you-
we need
well-
to vote on the motion.
Yes.
hold on,
Or
I
an
wanna
amendment.
I want to keep order on who's speaking out. I want to have a popcorn going. But thank you for that comment, Paul. Jesse, you-
Oh, I just wanted to ask, because we're in discussion, who all wants to wait till tomorrow? You can use your discussion to say yes or no.
That would be the way you could vote
We're chatting.
down the motion, right? And then come back tomorrow.
That's fair.
Yeah, just vote. That's the way to do it. Right?
Chuck?
Yeah.
I just add, I'm going to be supporting this motion with the understanding that if the public has any testimony, they'll have an opportunity to do it at the board meeting. And so I'm comfortable with the motion as it stands, and if there is public testimony, come and tell us about it when we deliberate it at the board.
Jim?
So regardless of what happens with this motion, I do want to take time, as we're here as a budget committee, to thank Sarah and Mike and their team and all the work that goes into the budget. I know the cabinet and your staff put a lot of time into, Superintendent Perry, so really, really want to thank them for all their hard work and looking at all the potential modifications and keeping on track of the changes with ADMW and the high-cost disability. I know it's not easy, but I do appreciate the work of Mike and Sarah and your staff for getting this together. And I think a couple of things. One, the lack of participation from the public is a little disappointing, but I think our staff has done a really good job in putting together a very thoughtful budget that prioritizes the needs of the students in the district. I've chaired this budget committee when we've had over 300 people sign up to testify over 4 or 5 nights because of significant budget cuts and significant budget allocation. So I do appreciate the parents and the people who showed up tonight. We do listen to those comments, and especially at the board level, we listen to those comments. But I think we're ready to move this budget forward to the board and have that discussion at the board level if the public wants to have additional comments. So I'm comfortable with the motion, and Sarah, Mike, Christy, thank you to the staff for all their work.
And Rachel, and then I'll make a comment.
I mean, on the one hand, it's always disappointing that more people don't come to comment on these meetings, but I think, and maybe this is a moment of progress we're seeing in the district. In some ways, it's often frustrating to be at these meetings and to get public comment now that really would have been much more helpful, a few months earlier, that this moment seems a little late often to really impact the budget. And so one of the things, and this may be something that the Student Success Act planning will be helpful for, is to continue to find ways where we hear about priorities and issues early enough that it can be built into the budget. And I feel that, over the years I've been on the budget committee, we've gotten better at that there aren't so many last minute issues that come up. But I think that's the really important work of getting public participation.
Again, my intention with this process has been to make sure that people who are want to come out and give testimony have a chance to do that. If I recall, we had another meeting prior to tonight where we did get a few people making comments, so we have had at least 2 nights where we received testimony. Again, I'm totally comfortable having another meeting, but I also, the people who spoke tonight, some of them have been coming for the whole budget process. They've been really engaged. I've seen them, as I said, I've gone out to people, I've asked people if they have any input that they wanted to provide. I know not everybody is willing or able to take the time for these meetings because they are very long and it's not the most fun subject. For some of us it might be, but not everybody enjoys it. But it's very important. So as a community advocate, it's very disappointing not to see this room full every night. That's what I said when I was elected, appointed chair, that I wanted this room full every night. And I try to work it so that it would happen. Unfortunately, it didn't. And if the group wanted to meet again tomorrow to hold more testimony, I personally would be totally in favor. But I think, like other people have said, I think we've seen where the community input is right now. And I don't know that there would be any more input tomorrow or different. And also from the committee members, we don't have any proposed amendments on the table. So I want to thank everybody for their work, and we do have a motion on the table. So, Sharon.
So just real quick, we have heard as a board, and I know that Alice has done a great job forwarding information onto the budget committee. So we have heard priorities from the community about behavioral health, social emotional learning, PBIS, all of that. And, we hear that reflected at the legislature and through the student success team who traveled across the state. So I think that we have had a lot of public comment in the last 12 months. And we have heard it in the boardroom. So we may not hear it right here tonight, but we've heard that, and the superintendent and her team have implemented that into the proposed budget. So I would commend you for acknowledging what has been shared, the concerns. We know that we're not anywhere close to addressing all of those needs, but this budget is a great start, and so thank you. And I agree with Chuck that if there are additional comments, the board would be more than happy to hear those like we have the last year.
And since I didn't do a good job of explaining that next process, we are forwarding this decision for the Board of Directors of the Salem-Keizer School District to make the official decision. So we are forwarding our recommendation. The Board of Directors gets to make the official approval, and that is again another opportunity for input, and from also from board members. So, Chuck, and then Jim.
You know, Levy, I think we'd be negligent if we didn't thank you for your leadership in this process. And Jim, buddy, you're going to be missed on the board and as part of this budget committee. But Levy and Jim, we salute you for your leadership and really driving us through this process. So thank you.
And before we vote, I have to declare a potential conflict of interest, as I do with every budget year. The dues are paid to the Oregon School Boards Association out of the Salem-Keizer School District budget. I'm the executive director at OSBA, and that has cause for a potential conflict of interest according to legal counsel, but still allows me to vote.
And thanks for the reminder. Because of CTAC, even though I'm not employed by CTAC or the school district, there's always a potential that somebody might be concerned about my role in that program. So it's a potential conflict of interest, not a direct one. So I will vote.
Thank you both. So we have a motion and a second. So all those in favor of approving the motion as presented, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, say nay.
Nay.
Okay, so the motion passes.
Just a quick thank you for your service on this. We actually did start way back in January with those reports that you got notice about from Alice. And to our families, especially our families from the coalition who actually came to every board meeting, that's a huge amount of your time. And your comments around the Language Culture Institute and HR recruiting, we will go back and do some really important thinking about those, because you're right, it's an important strategy for us. So we will go back and have some conversations internally about that. But thank you for your time and your commitment to the process, because it does take time.
And Superintendent Perry, there is some funds available in the statewide initiative part of the Student Success Act to address those things as well. So I would encourage you as a district and a board moving forward to look at those funds to help augment the practices that the district do. But I can't remember exactly how much is set aside in those three programs for American Natives and Black African American students and our Latino programs, but there are funds in that statewide initiative program for that.
And there's also diversity pathway funds
Correct.
as well. And we
Yes.
have one of the model programs in the state for that.
Yeah.
And before I do let you go, I want to say I do have some ideas about how to get the budget committee to meet a lot more. So I will be forwarding. So if what we wanted is more time to hear from the community, I have some ideas about that. And go ahead.
So before everybody leaves, I was really pleased that Superintendent Perry added that nominative amount transferred to the PERS pension debt service fund. And I would recommend, and maybe we'll have a formal motion on this by the committee, that if more funds do become available to the district because of the positive revenue forecast, I would think it would be good fiscal responsibility of the board to consider putting money towards that debt service if those additional funds do become available. And I'm happy to put that in the form of a motion or just a general recommendation.
Process question?
Yeah, I guess the question is, what would be helpful for the board? Would it be helpful to know how the rest of the budget committee feels about that?
I frankly am less certain on how things will go from this point. And there was a lot of discussion in the legislature with where those monies would go, especially with the other $1 billion. I would like to have that remain fluid so that we can
I'm not
meet.
suggesting any amount, Kathy. It was just if those funds become available, I would like the board to entertain the possibility of some money going towards that debt service.
Thank you. Jesse?
I think it's definitely something that we all have on our minds. I think we talk about it all the time. And so I think I appreciate the recommendation. I think it's great. I don't know if a motion would be appropriate, only because as we're looking through for the budget and as more monies come in, we want the flexibility to be able to allocate that towards other needs as well, I think is also important. And so if we made a motion and said, this is what we're doing with it right now, it wouldn't allow us the flexibility later if we saw other needs.
The motion that I'm entertaining would essentially be just a recommendation by the committee, if we are in agreement, that it would be a consideration for the board to take some of the monies that may become available in the future and consider putting them in there. It is not a must-do. It is not the only thing the monies would go towards. So it's just it would be a recommendation from the Budget Committee for the board to consider putting additional money into that fund.
And Kathleen, I appreciate that. The only concern I would have is that that's a debt service fund. And if we had additional funds to buy down our PERS rate, we would do it through a different mechanism, because that pays the bonded debt service on the unfunded actuarial liability bonds, our pension obligation bonds that the board has put out there. The ability to put $1 in there was recognition of the fact that it keeps that account open, and the ability to put money in. There's another bill working its way through the legislative process that may make adjustments to PERS that could potentially lower rates for all PERS employers across the state. It's up for a work session tomorrow in the full Ways and Means Committee. And I would second what Jesse has said. That is an issue that this board looks at constantly, and I appreciate that recommendation. I would agree with Jesse, we don't need a motion right now, but I would get the feeling from this committee, and I'm looking around, I see a lot of head nodding, that that's something you want the board to be considerate of. And obviously with the second piece of legislation related to PERS, Senate Bill 1049, working its way through, and any additional funds, we would obviously look at our biggest cost driver. PERS was a $14 million cost driver this year to the school district. So we would obviously want to look at that as a board. And even when I'm off the board and I get to be one of those annoying parents, that would be one of those things I would bring to this board.
I hope you come for public testimony.
On agenda or non-agenda
Agenda items.
Been practicing on
Don't go
that
over your
point.
minutes, though.
Adriana?
I appreciate the sentiment, Kathleen, but those are really, that's the bonded debt service side of PERS. We would want to look at potentially just making a lump sum payment to PERS above our payroll contribution. So that's always something in the back of the mind. We've talked about it multiple times at the board level. So I appreciate it.
Thank you.
And I think just for my comment is to follow up a little bit on Jim's comment with some of the investments that were put into the student success package. And I know that the coalition was a big advocate and a partner with the full coalition on the early childhood equity fund that was part of the student success plan. And this is a once-in-a-lifetime investment of $20 million into programs such as yours. So I know that that's in there because we worked so incredibly hard to make sure that it was included. So I know for a fact that those are additional funds that the state will now provide for programs to programs like the Salem-Keizer Coalition for Equality, as well as additional investments to the Native American, African American, and we created for the first time a Latino Student Success Plan that was also part of the Student Success Plan. So I'm really excited for that and excited to see what we can do with those additional funds in our district to expand on those services and those programs. So thank you.
Thank you. And to wrap up, and I think I want to I want to highlight the fact that, at least from while I've been paying attention, and staff, please correct me if I'm wrong, this might be the first time that we've had 2 people of color on the budget committee. And that wouldn't have happened if the board members hadn't appointed the committee members this time. It could have happened earlier, because I know the candidates were out there and applying, but it happened now. So I do want to highlight that, because not because having more diverse representation will make things better automatically, but without equitable representation, we're not going to get to achieve all the outcomes that we want. So kudos to the board members who appointed us. Thank you. And with that, I again want to thank everybody who's participated, all the budget committee members here and staff for their work. So meeting adjourned. Thank you.